Well, ladies, here we are in week 2 of our study of Ecclesiastes, and you heard the title, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. And this week we're going to start with chapter 4, and we're going to do 4, 5, and 6. And last week Deb reminded us that this is kind of a strange book, and that our goal in studying it is to see what God is trying to teach us in view of life under the sun. So the term under the sun is considered a Hebraism, which is a Jewish figure of speech. So whenever we hear the words under the sun, we need to equate that with life without God. While studying Ecclesiastes, I heard a story that reminded me that God can use anything and everything in His Word, including a book that seems very negative and a little confusing. So the story was, there was this man, he was on his deathbed, and his daughter wanted to come visit him and share Jesus with him. And this man, in the light of what the world would think, he was very successful. He had a wonderful career, he had a long life, he had a loving family, he had all kinds of things that were going for him, but he was living life under the sun without God. So she took her Bible with her, and she wanted to share about Jesus. And what was interesting to me is that she didn't start reading him out of like Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Or John 3:16, for God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, that whosoever believed in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. She started to read to him from Ecclesiastes. And you heard last week about all the meaningless. And apparently, by the time he got to chapter 3, he decided he wanted to accept Jesus as his Savior. So she got to go to his funeral, and with the confidence that she would get to see him one day. And all that was from a book that seemed to be telling us what not to do. So as a parent, I talk to my children a lot about what they should learn from me. And I have taught my children that what to do, but very often I have taught them what not to do by my mistakes. And those are sometimes the most important lessons, the ones not to do. And I beg them to learn those lessons the easy way and not the hard way. Hopefully Ecclesiastes will teach us some of those important lessons. Okay, so right away in chapter 4, the teacher looks at the evil around him and focuses on all the oppression that he sees under the sun, the tears of the oppressed and the power of the oppressors. So interestingly, the Bible defines oppression specifically as involving cheating one's neighbor of something, defrauding him or robbing him, including taking advantage of him financially. In Ezekiel 22:12, it says, "In you, Jerusalem, men accept bribes to shed blood. You take usury and excessive interest and make unjust gains from your neighbors by extortion. And you have forgotten me, declares the sovereign Lord." So in our society today, I'm sure many people have felt oppressed by high interest rates with credit cards and all that kind of things. And we seem to have to pay interest all over the place, whether it's our homes or our cars or the things that we purchase. And so here it's just warning us that we should treat each other kindly and not go into, not get involved under excessive interest rates. Okay, so people living without God can take advantage of each other. But people living with God are called to love their neighbor as themselves and as commanded, not suggested in Matthew 22, we are to love our neighbors. Point 1, we can learn what not to do from life under the sun, but we can learn what to do from Jesus. So if songs come to mind like I Can't Get No Satisfaction, I guess this is where we would talk about the Three Dog Night song, One is the Loneliest Number. This is where it fits in. In verse 8, it talks about a man all alone. He has neither a son nor a brother. He's worked hard but is not content, and he couldn't figure out who he's really working for at this point. His life then is described as meaningless. So throughout the Bible, Genesis through Revelations, we are told it is not good for man to be alone, and that we, the church, the body of Christ, are meant to be in relationship with Christ, with Him, and with each other. So we aren't meant to do life alone. Point 2, community is God's plan for us, and isolation is Satan's plan for us. And I'm sure now in this crazy time when we've felt isolated a lot, we need to make sure that we get into community. And I'm hoping this Bible study is exactly what you need to do that. So when in chapters 4, 9 through 12, we finally see something that reflects the teaching of life God's way above the sun. So it says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their work. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? The one may be overpowered, but 2 defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. So sometimes this verse is used in weddings. Sometimes the cord of 3 is to represent the couple and God. But and that type of relationship, of course, is very intimate. And intimate relationships are only meant for believers to share with other believers. And we're called to love everyone, even our enemies, but we are only called to be yoked to like-minded believers. And that is one lesson we don't want to learn the hard way. Chapter 4, we're going on. It ends with a proverb. It's kind of a proverb-like saying, better a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer knows how to take warning. Wow, as we age, we really need to figure that out. We need to know that we need to stay not only focused on godly wisdom, but we also need to remain teachable. In the beginning of chapter 5, verse 2, it says, when you enter the house of God, do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart, but utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. It's kind of interesting that we're supposed to be especially careful about our words while we're fellowshipping together in a church. So when the kids were little, I tried to teach them and myself that everything we thought didn't have to come immediately out of our mouths. And sometimes it did, and it was very unfortunate. But what we needed to remind each other was to use our filter. And I feel like this verse is really good. Let your words be few. Kind of reminds us and reminds me that we need to use our filter with each other, but we also need to do it with God. So as the wise Lisa Simpson said, it is better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Unfortunately, we are often uncomfortable with silence. And one commentary said it well. We have, in essence, made it extraordinarily difficult for ourselves in our technological sophistication to be still and know that I am God. And that's from Psalms 46:10. Chapter 5 goes on to say, when you make a vow to God, do not delay in fulfilling it. So verses 5 and 6 say, it is better not to vow than to make a vow and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth lead you into sin. That's a big one. That involves your filter, but also what the vows that you make. So there's really probably not a lot more things that are more irritating in life than having someone promise you something and then breaking that promise. So I feel like this is really important. And it does bring us to point 3. Use less words and keep your vows. Okay, this section of chapter 5 ends with a big exclamation mark. Therefore, stand in awe of God. And I feel like that's such a great idea. We just need to consistently and daily just stand in awe of what God has given us, what God is doing in our world, what God has created, all the wonderful things that just make our God so amazing. And we need to stand in awe of him. Throughout the Bible, it warns us to stay away from the love of money. And in verse 10, it says, whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. This too is meaningless. In 1 Timothy 6:10, it says it in even stronger terms, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. We learn in Proverbs that although material abundance is a gift from God, it also has its dangers. In Proverbs 30:8-9, it says, give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal, so dishonoring the name of my God. So for me personally, I often pray that God will give me just enough money that I don't have to think about it and not give me so much money that I have to think about it. So I just want to kind of fly under the radar of money, just have what I need, but not have too much that I have to invest or think or plan. So I hope that may be something that you pray for yourself also. So besides that, you can't take it with you. Anyway, remember the old bumper sticker that used to say, the one who dies with the most toys wins? Well, then right after that, a bumper sticker came out and said, whoever dies with the most toys still dies. And that's probably pretty much the point. And it's also a good reminder in verse 15, naked a man comes from his mother's womb, and as he comes, so he departs. He takes nothing from his labor that he can carry in his hand. But there is a treasure that you can take with you. And Matthew 6:20 says, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So this reminds me of my dad. And early on in my life, my dad was a workaholic, and he had some anger issues, and he was pretty insecure. But later on in his life, he got so sweet. He became sweet and kind and generous, and he was just especially generous to his church, his fellow believers. There's just so many stories of him just being so generous, and charities that supported the kingdom of God. And he would even give $1 to every homeless person he saw. And I would kind of scold him a little bit and say, Dad, you know what they're going to do with the money? It's probably not what they should. And he said, that is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to give them $1, and it's their responsibility what they do with it. And it kind of cracked me up. I thought it was pretty sweet. But he took his responsibility from God to be generous very seriously. And so when he was getting ready to die, and we didn't really know that this was kind of the end of his life, he was physically getting weaker, but we had no idea this would be the end of his life. And I went to visit him in Texas, and I was there for 6 days, and he died during that time, which was like kind of shocking to me. But the first 2 days, it was the sweetest time. The first 2 days, he was like really cute and having fun. And he was like, I came in and he's like, hey, cute purse. And I'm like, where is my dad? Who is this guy? And he even said, but your mother doesn't need one. I'm like, oh, okay. Anyway, so there was for 2 days of just fun, and we just had a great time and talked, and he was just really together and with it, and everything was going well. And the second 2 days, he kind of got a little bit more introspective, and he was telling us he was ready to go. And one time before we were leaving, he said, kiss me goodbye, and I'm like, okay, which was kind of unlike him. I mean, early on when we were growing up, he never really said he loved us. I mean, he just didn't say those words. I mean, he proved it by what he did, but he never really said he loved us. And so later in life, every time he had a chance, anytime we hung up on the phone, anytime we saw him, he always said he loved us. And it was so sweet. And so I just thought it was part of that. Well, the next 2 days, he didn't wake up much, but the caregivers said that he was fine, that he'd been up, he'd had breakfast, they bathed him, the whole thing. So we didn't assume that this was like the end. But on the second day of that time, my mom patted him and said, if you need to go, it's okay. Because the 2 prior days, he was telling us how ready he was. He was going to meet people at the station. I don't know where he got the station from, but his favorite pastor, he called him Brother John. He was like, Brother John's going to meet me at the station. And I was like, well, good for you. But he kept singing, and he didn't have a voice for singing, but it was really cute. He sang, this world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. And I just thought, oh, look at, he's ready to go. And he did. He passed so beautifully. But part of it was because he'd already laid up a lot of treasure in heaven. It was his home. He knew it was his home. And it was such a sweet passing. I haven't been around a lot of people that have passed away, but I just felt like it was the most beautiful transition from, being very together, like giving us time to say goodbye to him, and then just easing on into heaven beautifully. And I'm going to cry. I just know that Jesus said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. And I know we all want to hear that. And I feel really good. I feel like the girl who got to go to the funeral with her dad and say, I am confident that I get to see my dad again. And and he's laid up treasure in heaven, and he's enjoying his time with Jesus. And when we get there, we're going to talk all about it. So anyway, So the title of our series is I Can't Get No Satisfaction, but the end of chapter 5, we get a glimpse of how we can be satisfied. So verses 19 through 20 say, moreover, when God gives any man wealth and possessions and enables him to enjoy them, to accept his lot and be happy in his work, this is a gift from God. He seldom reflects on the days of his life, because God gives keeps him occupied and with gladness of heart. Sorry about that. I just like that so much. I like to think that we're going to just, we need to be occupied with gladness of heart. I also feel like God doesn't always give us wealth and many possessions, but he does give us a plan and a purpose. And I know Deb talked a lot about purpose yesterday. And over the past few years, I was like, there's so much happened into my life that I couldn't quite get my head wrapped around. It didn't feel like a plan to me. But then I heard a sermon just recently. And what was really cool about it, it reminded me that when, more than any time ever, when we don't see it as a plan, that it's probably because it's a purpose. It's a purpose that God is performing in our lives. And so I thought that was really cool. And I've really liked meshing those together, that God has a plan and a purpose for us, because sometimes like this pandemic, this does not feel like a plan. And yet, God has lots of purposes in this. We've been closer with our families. Some people have joined church that never did it before. He always has a purpose for what we go through. And, but sometimes we just aren't able to see that right away. He never wastes anything. God never lets anything that we go through be a waste. And so we know this time's been interesting, and it's not what we wanted. It's maybe not what we planned, what we think God planned, but he's not going to waste it. So we just need to be looking for what his purpose was in that. Just like Deb said, finding purpose in the little things. We need to find purpose in our time here. So if we substituted the words that we read from before, this is what it would sound like. Moreover, when God gives any man a plan and a purpose, and enables him to enjoy them, to accept his lot and be happy in his work, this is a gift from God. He seldom reflects on the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with gladness of heart. Now, I know we're not supposed to rewrite scripture, and that's not really what I'm trying to do, but I think that the biblical concept of planning and purpose they're gifts from God, are really important, and that we need to learn how to be satisfied with that, with our work, and have a glad heart. And maybe, who knows, maybe our plan and our purpose will include wealth and possessions. Maybe. So, point 5, find satisfaction in the gift God gives you and have a glad heart. Okay, so there's a really funny little section in chapter 6 that talks about a man having 100 children and living 1,000 years. Like, well, that's interesting. And it even says, or even 2 times 1,000, but does not enjoy his prosperity or gets a proper burial. He's better off not having been born. So it's really interesting. I think that the teacher sometimes says that there's so much under the sun that's evil or meaningless and that kind of thing, that he sees it's sometimes like better to not have ever been born, which it's kind of an interesting concept. But he does mention more often than anything else that he reminds us that we're going to die. Just like animals are going to die, we're going to die. We're just going to die. And so we need to be reminded of that. I think that's kind of something that we know is going to happen to all of us. So we finish in chapter 6 with a cheery little verse, verse 12. For who knows what is good for a man in life? During the few and meaningless days he passes through like a shadow. Who can tell him what will happen under the sun after he is gone? So I really can't let myself finish with that sad verse. That is the end of my passage. And yet I think we need to talk about what we need to look forward to as people who live above the sun. And so here's some verses I picked out for us. Romans 6:23, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Jesus Christ our Lord. And John 14:3, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, so that you may also be where I am. And Revelations 21:1-4, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer a sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne say, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. So We can choose to be satisfied and we can choose to have meaning in our life if we choose Jesus and we have eternal perspective. Remember, this world is not our home. We're just a passing through. I just hope you have a great time with your group. I hope you've connected well and you just have a wonderful discussion. Just learn as much as you can from Ecclesiastes.